Hi, I'm Akita Perumal Nagabushnam from What's Strong Out There. I'll be migrating to daily motion videos from YouTube. YouTube have been arbiters of freedom. They have just told me that my videos do not comply with their policies. Please follow me in the daily motion. My link is given below. Today, I'm just about to speak about human rights, or the right given by God, given to man. And when it's given, the rights are given by man, you have a problem. When the rights are taken away from man or deprived, you also have a problem. But these rights given by God is clearly stated in the rights have spoken in the American United States Constitution, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by the Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among which is life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So we have all been given rights. One of it is also the right to speak, freedom to speak, the freedom of religion, and the freedom of the press. These are rights, which is not stated, but life itself is a right. Liberty is a right. And the pursuit of happiness is also a right. That is to secure these rights. Continue. Governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. Simply means that the government is supposed to give us these rights, the freedom to speak, the freedom to publish, the freedom for press, the freedom of liberty of life, the freedom for pursuit of happiness. The government has to do that. And how did the government get their powers? It is from the consent of the people. The right to freedom of expression has also been recognized in the United Nations Human Rights Declaration. Now, let's talk about the rights given by God. The rights of God are given because men are equal. And if we need special rights, which means that we are not equal. That if we need special rights given by man, which means we need some kind of crutches. So let's look of the rights given by man, which can be subjected to any kind of omission and reduction. Where have you seen rights given by men having been very successful? For instance, the BUMIPUTRA rights is one. The rights given to the Aborigines in Australia is another. The rights given to the Native Americans is another. These rights given by men are all failed policies. The rights given by men has never, in all instances, never been successful. Let's look at the BUMIPUTRA rights, for instance. It has been in fact manipulated by man for self-serving interests and by people in the elite group for their own purposes, while at the same time creating some kind of rights. What are the effect of these rights on the people? People have been denied of promotions in the civil services, denial of contracts in government, denial of senior positions in all sectors, denial of education and opportunities, denial of sporting opportunities, the denial of scholarships, the denial of recruitment in the armed forces, the denial of top executive positions in all the GLCs, and denial of business license to non-Malays. So what is the effect of all this denial to non-Malays? In fact, what happens is they strengthen the non-Malays and weaken the Malays. And in fact, Malays have been told that they have been not capable enough, they've not been able to match it, and so they need all these rights. In my years of working or studying and living with the Malays, I found that they are equally competent with any other people in the world, in the planet. In fact, in my school years, the Malays were far more efficient in their studies than the non-Malays. In fact, some of them were top Malay students in mathematics and in other fields too. So why make them any lesser? Are we saying that they are not made equal by God? Something has gone wrong with them? And some say they're lazy. And I don't think that all these things are right. And I have worked with so many interns in my office for Malays. They're so hardworking and diligent. And they don't need any special rights to support them. All these special rights given are just to benefit some special interest groups. Now let's look at another instance where rights are taken away by man. The right to freedom of expression has been recognized as a human right in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. In Singapore is a good case. If you speak up, you will suffer. What is the effect of removing the rights? One is there's a bankruptcy of idea. Two, you make men compliant. You make them weak. We don't make people of thinking. You have a problem when they're supposed to be in the helm of leadership and you find that they were not able to lead because they've been subjected to oppression and all these years and not been able to stand up. Let's look at a situation where you have a family where the children are all subjected to very bad abusive for any speaking up. They have been beaten up for speaking up every other occasion, subject to some kind of miserable treatment. Would you think they will become children who are confident and able to lead in the future? They will become people who are compliant and obsequient. Let's see what is the case. What is the case in Singapore? Let's look at the housing industry. The public housing is a total failure in the sense that they look grossly or they don't even look nice. In Malaysia, that kind of quality of housing, which is considered a poor quality, is only given for the poorer group of people called the low-cost housing. We wouldn't call it a successful. You may house people, but they're monotonous, dull, and it is an eyesore to the nation. Let's look at the architecture. Even at the top architecture of buildings, a ship on top of a building, isn't there a case of a bankrupt idea, case of bankruptcy of ideas, where I think we can do a lot more better, right? The other is the greening of the city by 2030. The movement of global weather crisis is flawed. 20 to 30,000 scientists all over the world have written to the United States Congress to declare that it is a flawed idea, that there's no global crisis. There's no global weather crisis. 400 prominent scientists at the same time have spoken up, saying, defying that the global crisis isn't there. Now, 30 years ago, some of the oil companies have talked about the water level rising all over the world, as reported by NASA. Did they find that by now, 30 years from now, as of then to now, the sea levels would have risen so high that even the Singapore ports would not be usable? They also talked about 5 years ago, or start warning that the temperatures are rising, and by now, the world should cease to exist. But what happened to all the prophecies that did not come to pass? Are there anyone in Singapore who's thinking, voicing out, the top leadership? The sciences in global weather warming is not there. Why take the lead? Why follow the United Nations blindly? This is the case when you have a suppression, an oppression of people, when you deprive the people the right to speak. Another is the money laundering. Singapore is a nation where the voice of the people have been deprived and the freedom to speak is deprived. Top leaders with unfettered powers are doomed to mislead and misguide the nations with all the powers. When the powers of the government are supposed to be derived from the people, not from the top down, upside down, not from the top down, but from the bottom up. Powers are derived from the people. Now let's look at the Pandara papers. Singapore is a case where a destination of big companies who want to shift profits, money laundering, groups are attracted to.
Investigation begins in Singapore. Glittering island financial hub is an ideal place to set up complex business structures.
The corporate tax rate of 17% has always been traditionally much lower than other foreign jurisdictions. So that's attractive to companies that want to go set up business there and pay less tax. And of course, if you're going to go to the effort of setting up a headquarter in a country like Singapore, and you're a big multinational firm, and you're involved in profit shifting activities and a whole range of other things that are certainly immoral and unethical, then what you're going to also demand from the Singapore government is layers of regulations to hide your identity and what you're doing. It's actually a recipe for setting themselves up for scandal.
For the last 40 years, Singapore has been home to a little-known business, run by an Australian accountant named Graham Briggs. He set up his company Asia City here in the 1980s. Today, it's a global business with clients on every continent.
It's one of the largest offshore service providers in the world. And it's actually run by an Australian man.
Asia City prides itself on trust and discretion, keeping the confidential information of its high-profile clients secret. Now, an anonymous source has leaked millions of internal documents from Asia City and 13 other offshore providers to media around the world through the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists, company and trust structure.
One of the trends that's emerging in the documents in the Pandara papers is the fact that this offshore world lobbies behind the scenes. It lobbies governments to allow the offshore world to take place.
In another secretive offshore setup managed by Asia City, a Singaporean company called Bright Ruby Resources spent nearly $300 million on 2 office towers in Sydney's CBD, and bought Sydney's iconic Hilton Hotel in 2015 for $442 million. Documents in the leak reveal the 6 layers of companies and trusts between Bright Ruby and its ultimate owner.
Advantages of having opaque structures like companies. They're both, again, they give an air of legitimacy. That's owned by a foreign company, so it must be okay. But then you get a string of companies, and then you'll get companies who are owned by nominees, and nominees aren't often declared. Or there'll be companies who are controlled not by their shareholders, but by their creditors. And so it's hard to actually pick where the control's actually coming from.
In 2010, Asia City set up offshore trusts for a long-time associate of the president, Nigerian politician Abubakar Atiku Bagudu. It was later alleged in court documents that the pair had systematically embezzled public funds worth billions of dollars. Asia City kept Bagudu on as a client regardless.
Once in 2013, when it became very public that Mr. Bagudu was listed in the U.S. complaint, they could have said, you know what, there's enough here that causes us pause. So we're going to go ahead and close this account or, request that you're no longer our customer. That didn't happen. Extremely frustrating. And again, it comes back to these known havens, right? Whether it was Vanuatu, Singapore, Cayman, Switzerland at the time, you have a handful of people who loot the resources of a country, whether it's oil-rich Nigeria, oil-rich South Sudan, resource-rich Congo, and yet frequently a great percentage of the population is living below the poverty level.
Asia City helped set up an offshore network for Herman Greff and one of his old government colleagues, Putin's former Deputy Chief of Staff, Kirill Androsov. The transactions of Asia City's Russian clients were later investigated by the Singaporean regulator, which delivered a damning report.
Well, they found that the Asia City's anti-money laundering systems were very, very lacking. They were lacking in many ways. They suggested that the policies and processes weren't in place and that those policies and processes that were in place weren't being followed properly.
Last year, the Monetary Authority of Singapore fined Asia City $1.1 million for failing to adequately monitor its high-risk clients and multiple, and in some cases systemic, lapses in anti-money laundering controls.
The fine was so minimal. I mean, it's less than a slap on the wrist.
They pay the fine and then it's just business as usual.
Scope of their reach. So they've formed various joint task forces to try to combat hidden income, hidden assets, and the whole camouflaging of beneficial ownership.
When you start becoming a destination for criminal money and ill-gotten money, there's the question of what other problems are you bringing in with it as well.
It's estimated up to 1/10 of the world's wealth is parked in offshore financial centres, costing governments hundreds of billions of dollars in lost tax revenue each year.
In the case of the Nigerian case, Bagadu helped the head of state in Nigeria to launder 2.3 billion. And Bagadu was later imprisoned in the United States for money laundering. Bagadu Abu Bakr transferred 99 million euro to Singapore, and 10 years later, the MAS of Singapore fined Asia City for money laundering or breaking some serious breaches in the rules. It takes 10 years for government policy makers to identify Bagadu from Nigeria, an accomplice to a major money laundering case. And moreover, a criminal who was jailed in the US was allowed to bring in money into Singapore and not knowing for 10 years. And then the fine was given for 1 million, a slap on the wrist. What is this all about? In Malaysia, when you pump in Malaysia, if you send in about 5,000 USD, transfer into an account, a red flag is raised. The banks would call you and question you where the money is from, where is it going to, what is it for? But with 99 million sent in 10 years ago, not questioned, no flag raised, are we in a city where it is harboring money launderers? What happens to a country where the top level have unquestionable and unfettered powers? What happens to them? This is what happens when people's rights to speak, when the freedom to speak is diminished. Unquestionable, unfettered powers given to top leaders. And so we have some misplaced, misguided top leaders who would harbor all sorts of policies which are different for the people and one another for the people at the helm. Policies are different, but policies for the people. In the Pandara papers, no Singaporeans were incriminated. No one was asked. No Singaporeans was involved. But Singapore as a government was involved. What happened to a nation which solicits money from the poor of the world, such as Nigeria? What happens? Is there a law of God, a law of justice? Will that not have an efficacy on it? What happened to the karma, which some people say the law of karma? Let's see another thing that happened. Singaporeans were asked to drink poo. Nobody ever questioned it. It was justified by the top levels that it's okay to drink poo. What does it symbolize? A backwardness, a deprivation, a depression of quality of life, isn't it? I'm sure the water could be, fresh water could be taken from the air as the Israelites do. We can also desalinate water from the ocean. If tomorrow, if someone says in the top leadership that it's okay to eat poop, would there be anyone be able to ask up and speak up to the leaders? Where did the powers of the nation come from? Does it come from the leaders top, or does it come from those who are governed? The powers of government is derived from the just powers of the governed, and not the other way. I'm Architect Perumal Nagapushnam from What's Wrong Out There. Please follow me in the Daily Motion videos. Thank you.